Welcome. This week we're getting ready to go over lessons 117 through 120. The last lesson was a little bitty introduction to division. This week it's all about fractions. And fractions are a form of division, but we use a fraction chart. I think your child's going to really enjoy it this week. I think you're going to enjoy it this week. So let's see what materials we need, and then we'll get started. You're going to need the abacus, the fraction chart, and we'll go over that when we start our lesson on 117. The math card game book, the geared clock, 2 containers that are different shapes. So whatever you have, it doesn't have to be glasses, it can be pitchers. It doesn't matter how much, they just have to be 2 containers. Measuring cups, and your dry erase board. Lesson 117, introducing fractions. All right, so in this lesson, you're going to start off using your abacus, and you're going to have your child build the stairs, and then they're going to tell you which order, like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so forth. You're just going to refresh your children with the ordinal numbers, because we're going to use a lot of those sounds when we're working with the fractions. This lesson calls for the fraction chart, and this is new. We haven't used it yet, but I love it. I love this for teaching fractions. I wish I would have had something like this when I was younger. So you have a solid board, and you'll see it's a linear fraction chart. Then you have a second board that looks like this, but the pieces can be broken out, like you just snap them apart, and then you'll have a bunch of little pieces. Now what's nice is Right Start does provide a little baggie, so you could put all your pieces and keep it in the baggie. You may prefer to put it into another container. The problem with another container is that usually this is too big. So example, if I was going to save it in this, something like that, way too big. I find that the baggie works just fine. And then I just put this in wherever I'm storing all my other material. You do not have to do anything to prepare for the fraction chart. They're going to take the one that looks like this, but you could break the pieces apart, and they're going to break them apart. Then they're going to reassemble the fraction chart. Give them time to let them do it as well as they can on their own. One nice thing with these is that they're a nice, sturdy, fairly sturdy plastic. I mean, look, they do have movement, but you're going to have to be really forceful to get it to bend. We've had ours for a long time. They've held up really well. In the notes down towards the bottom, it talks about how it's important to introduce young children to fractions early. It says that a young child has little difficulty distinguishing between 1/3 and 1/4, which is bigger, which is smaller. If you wait till they're older and they've really been used to the numbers 3 and 4, then they tend to have a little bit more difficulty when it comes to fractions. The fraction stairs is pretty basic. It's just taking one of each of the fractions, and they just put it one on top of each other. Appreciate how fractions are introduced in Right Start, especially using these tools, these manipulatives. So here we have the whole. You're asking your child to find the piece that would be half as big. So they're going to find that piece, and they're going to put it on. And here's the other piece. All right. Doing the best I can holding it up. This is nice because this is all they're going to see. They're not overwhelmed by the rest of the fraction board. And so they can see how you have one broken into 2 parts. The one on the top divided into half. That's what the fraction is saying. So we took our 1, we've divided into half. It's pretty neat. And you'll see that same with the thirds, same with the fourths, and they're only going to focus on those. So they're going to have the whole, and then they're going to have the 3/3, each of the little 1/3 to fill up the line. They're going to see how that 1 is broken into 3 parts. They're going to see how the 1 is broken into 4 parts. And eventually they're going to be able to look at this whole thing and understand what it means. Because down here, it's really 1 broken up into 10 parts. When we're working with this fraction, we call it 1/4. In America, that is. Now, like in Britain, with the British English, they call it 1/4. And it makes a lot of sense. 1/4. I think about a dollar. How many quarters does it take? Yeah, to make a dollar. 4 quarters. And we can break the clock into quarters. We have games broken into quarters, the 4 periods. So the first quarter, like football, there's 4 quarters to football. And halftime is after 2. So there is a benefit to calling this quarters also. So if you want to interchange with your child, feel free to do so. If not, you can stick with 1/4. They're going to learn about quarters soon enough. So there's no game scheduled for this lesson. Feel free if you want to go and pick a game out to play. Feel free if you decide not to play a game at all. Totally up to you guys. Lesson 118, comparing unit fractions. All a unit fraction is the fraction that has 1 in the numerator, meaning the top number of the fraction has a 1. That's what a unit fraction is. Again, you're going to have your child assemble the fraction chart. It's important that they do that, all right? Just don't pull out the whole one and go and work from there. Let your child build the fraction chart. That's how they're learning. As it says, a fraction piece should be identified by its length, not its color. And that's why all our fraction pieces are uniform. They are all white with green lettering and a little green trim around the individual pieces. So once the fraction chart is complete, then there are questions that you will be asking your child. Avoid, as it says in the extras, avoid any kind of rules at this point. Let them just observe and learn. And again, just like in any other lesson, if they're struggling, feel free to guide them to find the answer. Don't tell them the answer. Guide them to find the answer. An example of leading them. So look at question number 1. We're asking, where is 1/2? Now, they may point to it. I think that question could be redone and say, which row do you see 1/2? That way, then they'll say, oh, the second row. Or like number 3, it says to name 2 fractions greater than 1/4. If they seem a little hesitant, you could always say which fractions are bigger. Maybe use the word bigger instead of greater to help them understand what you're asking them to find. On the second page, there are 2 games. I forgot to include the fraction cards in your needed materials. So you will need them. They look like this. They're orange on this side, and then the writing is orange, but you'll see the fractions on the other side. There's also some percents in this pile of cards, the fraction cards. Go ahead and take those percents out. You will not be needing them. This is a pretty easy game. It shows you in the game book which fraction card you're going to pull out. You're only going to have 8 cards, and you're going to get the pieces that match. So one of the cards is a 1/5. You'll also get the little fraction piece, 1/5. And what you'll do is you're going to lay the cards face down on one side. To the other side, you're going to lay the little fraction pieces face down. And then the child's going to play the game by flipping over the card, 1/5, and then looking for the fraction piece. What's really nice about this game is they're really having to focus on the size, and it makes them really have to think about the size in comparison to the other sizes. Is how 1/5 is kind of in the middle, right? So we know 1/10 is smaller. They're going to recognize 1/6 is smaller. So hopefully this is going to help them really understand the different sizes of the fractions. Now there's a second game. You could play this game on the day you do this lesson, or you could save this game for another day if there's not a lesson scheduled, or keep it for that fifth day. The unit fraction war game is just like any other card game of war. You'll pull out the cards that it's telling you to, shuffle them, then deal them evenly to each other or whoever's playing so that everybody has the same amount of cards. Then they're just going to flip their card over. And whoever has the greater fraction, the larger, bigger fraction, however you want to look at it, they get to take the cards. They can use the fraction chart if they need to. Highly encourage them to, until they really start understanding. And once they start understanding, they're not going to want to use that chart. They won't need to. The in conclusion has a note to the right. Make sure you read that, because these questions that are being asked, remember we talked about this a while back, that the in conclusion is kind of a review, or it might be presenting something a little bit different, kind of stretch their brains. That's what this one is. The questions are being asked a little bit differently to expand your child's conceptual understanding. Lesson 119, Measuring with Water. This is the lesson you need those two different shaped containers. You're going to need the measuring cups also. This is just going to be a fun lesson. I mean, you get to play with water. Just find some containers. It doesn't matter. They could be little bitty containers. They could be very big containers. It's whatever you have available. Just make sure the two containers are different sizes. Along with reviewing our unit fractions, we're going to now ramp it up just a little bit, as they're going to compare 1 whole to 1/2 to 1/4. The activity with the measuring cups, pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go into any kind of detail there. But notice there's not a game scheduled today. So you could play one of those two fraction games from the previous lesson. So choose to do one, save the other one for this lesson. Or if you want, you could pick out another game to focus on some areas that you think your child might need more strength on. You know where your child's at and where they need the help. Last lesson for this week, lesson 120, non-unit fractions. Again, you are going to have your child assemble the fraction chart. I know you're thinking, oh, again, but honestly, it's really important that your child do this. And knowing ahead of time, you could say, hey, we're going to do our math, in 10 minutes. I want you to get out the fraction pieces and put the fraction chart together so it's ready for when we start math. So that way it doesn't have to be that part of the time where you guys are together and then you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs while your child's working on building the fraction chart. You can put them to doing that before you sit down and do their math with them. This explanation to the right, the second one, where it says, while it may seem obvious that 4/4 make 1, there's many people of all ages who do not understand the concept. Dr. Cotter was sharing that she would ask adults, how many eighths make up a whole? She said a lot of them could not answer her. And that's the basic foundation of fractions. If our children don't understand, or we don't understand, how many of one fraction makes up the whole, then we're going to have problems with fractions. And another reason why the linear fraction chart is such a great tool. It really helps the child as well as yourself to see those fractions. For the activity of equal fractions at the bottom of the page, you're going to be using the fraction pieces, but they're going to be flipped over, and you're going to flip the other pieces over, and you're asking your child to find 3 pieces that will equal this whole. Now, if they do it right, they're going to find the 3 pieces that are all the same size, so it's evenly divided. If they do, awesome. You just need to do this one to the side. You're going to have to find some pieces that can make it look like it's one whole, but it's not divided equally into 3 parts. And then in the explanation, if your child's the one that puts the 3 parts that are not equal together because they equal 1, such as the 1/2 and 2/4, then you can ask them, direct them. Don't tell them, oh, you're wrong. Okay, don't do that. You can ask them, are these pieces equal? You're looking for 3 equal pieces. You can ask your child, what's it mean to be equal? That they're all the same. They're all the same size. At the top of the second page, our focus is going to be on teaching your child how to write the fraction. And it's really important that they see that that line is divided by. It's 1 divided by 3. I can't tell you how many people, how many older people that I know don't realize that a fraction is a division problem. It's just written differently. You don't have that little division sign. That line between the numbers means division. In the way they're doing these non-unit fractions, that last activity before the game, I really have no words because I just think it's genius. So we find 2 1/5. How many fifths do we have? Well, we have 2 fifths. And then they learn to write 2 fifths. And they see the 1/5 and the 1/5 is 2 fifths. Guess what they're doing? They're adding fractions. They don't know they're adding fractions, but they are. So when they get to the lessons, and it's not in this level, I promise you, but when they get there and they have to start adding fractions, it just makes it so much more understandable. And I feel like Right Start kids have less problems when it comes to fractions because of the way it's taught. And then you'll end with this game. Can you find the fractions game? And notice what it says in the explanations, that at the end of the exercise, all these fraction pieces will be used because you're going to ask them questions and look for specific fractions. They're going to build the chart as they find those pieces. We're done for this week. This week's all about fractions. It should be a fun week. And guess what? Next week we have two more lessons on fractions, and then we start reviews and assessments. You guys are almost done. I just feel excited for you guys. Anyway, join me next week as we go over lessons 121 through 124. Until then.